Hi, I'm Bonnie Kempke. Welcome to my studio and welcome to Quilting on a Thread. This video is another one of my getting to know your machines, and this happens to be getting to know your little rebel. And today's topic will be how to oil and clean your machine. There are really only a few things that you must have in order to clean and oil your machine. And so I recommend, of course, that you have some sort of a static resistant rag to wipe down your machine. You'll want at least the brush that came with your machine to brush out any lint and debris. The threader and needle placement tool is a good thing to have. This is the one that came with your machine. I use a different one, but this is what came with your little rebel. The needle alignment magnet, if you're going to remove and replace your needle, which I recommend that you do when you're cleaning the machine. The little screwdriver that came in the toolkit with your machine to remove your needle plate, and oil. Those are the few things that you must have on hand. Now, as I'm cleaning my machine, you're going to see a couple of other tools. You're going to see the different needle placement tool. This comes from Singer, and I like this tool specifically because it has a really great latch on it to grab that needle. It opens up, you put the needle in, you let go of it, and that needle isn't moving anywhere. So I really like this tool. Again, it's from Singer. I will have on hand a pair of needle nose tweezers in case I get any lint that I can't just brush out. I like to have a magnet on hand in case I drop one of the metal pieces of tools, or in case I find an errant needle tip that has broken off and is still in the machine. I like to have a magnet handy. I tend to wipe things down with a nice fluffy sable brush. This is an oval mop brush. It's a paintbrush, sable bristles, and that's important because they grab lint very well, and they also release the lint very well when I want to clean it. Dental floss. This is what I use to clean out the tensioning discs, and I use it a lot to check for burrs on pieces of metal that might be damaged. I also use mascara wands. These are easily available. These happen to come from Walmart. Really good to have are these miniature headed brushes. So I will use one or two of those if needed to grab extra lint. Now, I don't oil directly from any bottles. Most bottles of machine oil leak. I don't want it all over my machines. So I use a round sable brush, another paintbrush. This is a number 5. Yes, it is. It's a number 5. And what I like about these bristles are they're very, very flexible. But when wetted with oil, it comes to a nice fine point, and I can get that oil exactly where I want it. I also use a clear plastic package. Use this, and I put the oil in here. That way I can verify that the oil is still clear. And once the oil starts changing to an amber color, I throw the bottle of oil out because that amber oil has started to degrade. So those are the tools, and let's get started. So before I begin cleaning my machine, I always de-thread the machine so that I don't have to contend with the thread getting in my way. One of the things I hate to see is when people will grab the thread here back of the threading path and pull that thread back out. It's not good for your machine. So I cut the thread here, take the spool of thread off, set it aside, and I will loosen the thread from the pole, that pole up here. Make sure that the take-up lever is all the way at the top. That means my tension discs are disengaged. I will go de-thread the needle itself and just slowly pull the thread out of the path on the machine. That is the first thing I do. Then I verify that my machine is off and unplugged from the wall. I don't want anything errant to happen. Now that my machine is de-threaded, I'm going to go ahead and dust the entire machine down. The reason why I do this is while I'm cleaning the machine, I don't want dust that's on the machine to be dragged into the areas that I'm cleaning. So it's just real simple to dust the machine and get everything you can off of the outside surface. Get the front, sides, and the back, and any of the apparatus. So that's a moment or two of time, but believe me, it's well worth it. The very next thing I'm going to do is go ahead and clean the tensioners. Your book talks about going ahead and loosening up the pre-tensioner screw and loosening up the tension on your primary tension system. I prefer not to do that. I prefer a bit of unwaxed flat dental floss. This happens to be Glide. It's really nice. One of the things I like about this is if I hit a snag in my tensioners, it's going to cause a little tear on the floss, and I'm going to be able to see that, and I'm going to know that I need to attend to something. So for these pre-tensioners, you just go between the discs. I start and start the floss from the top and go down, and then rotate my edges up and start flossing around from there. And I kind of go at 12 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and then just kind of clean it all out. We'll do the same thing with the primary tension, but what we will do with the primary tension is come in from the right side and come to the left. Now we've got to worry about that spring, so let the floss come around the spring, then go on up to noon, then come to 3, 6, come back to 9, and kind of sweep through there. That's just to be very, very thorough through. Now, if you continue to have any issues, then definitely you want to go ahead and loosen your tension all the way up and go by the instructions in the book. Loosen your tension up, clean that out with the brush, look for any debris, then reset your tension again. But this way, you're not going to be having to reset your tension. Now for this section, I've had to relocate you and looking into the bobbin area. I'm going to come in here and remove the bobbin, and you do that by lifting that little lever up and pulling the bobbin straight out. Now you want to hold that lever tight the whole time you pull it out, because that holds the bobbin in the bobbin case. If I release that lever, the bobbin just drops out of the bobbin case. So this is true of any bobbin that has a side on it. What I like to do with the bobbin case is just make sure that it looks nice and clean, and that if I'm using the bobbin spring, that it's in place. Now that's that half moon thing that you see in there. That spring is what helps to keep the bobbin from backlashing while you're sewing. If you're not using that spring, then you are probably using one of those silicone discs, or you're using a magnetic bobbin, something that keeps the bobbin from free throwing in your bobbin case itself. Now I'm going back to the dental floss that we had earlier. Underneath this bobbin tension thread arm, you can get lint and stuff caught in there. And so there's a little gap. Hopefully I can get it to where you can see that. So we insert that underneath that gap. And it just comes out, and now you have the floss on both sides of that thread tension arm. Bring it up to the top and kind of wax it back and forth on that thread tension arm. Bring it as far back as you can into that hook itself, and then just pull it out. That will help to get the lint out from underneath your thread tension arm. The thread tension arm is the part that tightens up when you're adjusting, tightens or loosens up when you're adjusting the screw for your tension. So another thing I like to do is take a jeweler's cloth and just polish the bobbin. It's not necessary, but I just like to keep the bobbin as clean as possible, and a little bit of jeweler's cloth will clean debris up that might start changing the color or pitting the finish on your bobbin case. So now that we have the bobbin out and the bobbin case is available, the bobbin area is available for us to look in, I'm going to take a brush that I use. This happens to be that mop brush that I told you about. I'm just going to go in there and I'm going to sweep the sides, the top, and the back, and I'll sweep inside the mechanism. Now I'm going to use the hand wheel and I'm going to rotate the mechanism around until the needle is at the halfway point. Works best if the needle is at the halfway point on its rise from your machine. And I'll come in here and I'll get oil on my brush to make my brush wet but not sopping, so I dab the excess off of it. And I get in there and I oil that little section where the hook is coming down on the machine. So I get some oil in there. And you want to get the oil between the silver and the black part. And then we're going to go ahead and rotate around a good 5 or 6 times to get that oil circulated. Now once that oil is circulated, I'm going to raise the needle to the highest point. Now that I've done with cleaning and oiling the bobbin area, the next thing I want to do, since the bobbin case and the bobbin are handy and I won't forget, I'm just going to go ahead and test the tension on the bobbin. So remember, when you put your bobbin in with the divot up, the bobbin goes in and it should look like a Q. So it goes into that little slot and then up and traces through the tension spring there, the little metal slat, and you want to get it over on the far side of that little hook there. So once that's there and the bobbin pulls freely, now we're going to set the bobbin in the palm of our hand, pull on the thread, and the bobbin case should stand and the bobbin thread pull and the bobbin rotate, and you want the bobbin to be rotating clockwise. So once that's done, I'm going to go ahead and leave the bobbin in it. I'm going to shorten my thread because I pulled out a lot of thread testing the bobbin tension. So I'll pull that thread out. I'll set the bobbin aside. Always be sure to set everything you're working with aside and in a common location. That way you're not going to misplace anything. You don't want to be in the middle of cleaning your machine and can't find the part that you want to put back. So the next thing I'm going to do is remove my needle plate. And I'm removing the needle plate to clean around the feed dogs. What I find helpful in removing the needle plate is to go ahead and press that little lever that lets go of the presser foot, because the presser foot just gets in my way while I'm trying to remove the needle plate. So always remember, with most screws on your machine, anything that you're going to deal with is going to go left to loosen, right to tighten. So lefty loosey, righty tighty. And you just need to work these through enough so that you can get to the point where you can loosen it the rest of the way with your fingers. That just seems to be the easiest way to do it, because if you try and sit here and play with the screw, you just get annoyed. But if you go in there and just hug it with your fingers and move it, the screws come right out. So after we have the needle plate off, after we have the screws out, before we remove the needle plate, I'm going to relocate the camera because I want you to see how easy it really is to lift this needle plate out. So this is great. If I can manage to stay out of your way, I think this will be a good position for the rest of our video. So in the back of this needle plate, there is a little half moon divot on the back of your base of your machine. All you have to do is put your finger in the back of that divot and use that to lift up and pull the needle plate out. Now everything is exposed. I'm going to take the brush that we got from our kit and my sable brush that I like and a flashlight. I just take the flashlight and this brush and I sweep and I pull up and I look at the bristles of my brush to see if there's any lint or dust. Nothing that I'm seeing, but just tapping that brush in and sweeping it when I first start, that helps. So there's nothing that I see, but I'm going to go ahead and take these heavier bristled, this nylon bristle, and I like to just go ahead and sweep between, because that lets me make sure that I got anything that might be in there out. Now, there is no oiling that is necessary from this position on your machine. One of the things I want to caution you about is this little electronic piece here. While you're doing any cleaning, don't manhandle that machine, that piece. So now that we have the needle plate off, I go ahead and inspect the needle plate and take my little brush and brush for any debris. I want to make sure that I get in those little gouges for the feed dogs, and I want to feel along those and make sure that they're smooth. If they're not smooth, you can take a little bit of a honing stick and smooth those out. But generally, unless you've had a needle crash, they're going to be smooth. This is another time where I like my little jeweler's cloth, and I like to go ahead and buff out the surface on my needle plate, both on top and behind and below, just to make sure that it stays in as pristine a condition as possible. So of course the next thing to do is to replace the needle plate. Please, when you're replacing the needle plate, make sure that you can see the numbers and the numbers are facing you. Put it in, and you just want to slide it carefully under what is part of your presser foot collar. It comes down, and that's what holds your presser foot. So bring it down. It's going to be loose in there, and it'll also wobble a little bit. All that is normal. Bring one of the screws over, drop it into its hole, and I like to start it by hugging it with my fingers. Once you get that one started, bring the other one over. Again, I like to start it by hugging it with my fingers. Before you tighten it down, hand crank your needle to make sure that it goes into the needle hole. Go ahead and hand crank it all the way around and back up. And it might be best to guard your fingers and get the needle bar up as high as it'll go. And then just go ahead and hand tighten those screws. Now once the screws are hand tight, I always go back and give it one little tweak. You're probably not going to move it much, but that one little tweak is a little bit more than hand tight, and it lets you protect your needle plate and the screws from coming loose. Everything should be smooth. Just to be sure, give that hand wheel another turn to make sure that your needle actually does go into the hole. Now, normally when I clean my machine, I'm going to go ahead and replace my needle. As I've mentioned, I've cleaned this machine several times, so I'm not going to replace my needle, but I am going to take the needle out and put it back in so that you can see how that actually occurs, just so you can see it visually. But if I were changing needles, I would use Gross Beckert needles or Grace Company needles. I would not use just some random needles. You want to make sure that they are 134 MR, and you want to see an R down here at the bottom, or you want to see the FFG SES. Those are both points that are appropriate for your little rebel. So, to remove the needle, you want to come over here and slightly loosen the thumb screw on the needle collar. Once you get that loosened enough, you want to just pull it out. I loosened the thumb screw just a little bit more so I won't have trouble getting it back in. I would then throw this needle out safely and take one of my needles out of my Grosbeckert packs, and then make sure that that needle is undamaged and put it in the machine. You're going to want your needle alignment magnet, the tool that the Grace Company includes with the packet for your little rebel, or my Singer tool, and I prefer the Singer tool. So what I do is I find and position the scarf to the rear of how I'm holding the needle, grab the needle with the Singer tool. This is why I like the Singer tool. It holds the needle in place. So now that I have that, and I have my scarf in the back, the scarf portion is the indent that you see on the back of your needle. So now that I have that, set that aside while I get the magnet out of its little pouch. I always store my magnet back in this pouch so as not to lose it, because by itself, that magnet is so easy to lose. So what I do is I hold the needle and I let the magnet come up and attach itself to the front of the scarf. The reason why I'm using the magnet is because then I can adjust the needle in my tool so that the magnet and my tool are aligned with one another. They're parallel on all planes. And I can use this to now insert my needle. Remember that the scarf faces the back of your machine. There's a hole here above the thumb screw that you want to look into and make sure that the needle is all the way at the top of that hole. Once that's settled, then go ahead and tighten this thumb screw. You can tighten it with just your thumb, but it's better if you tighten it and give it that one extra twist. Then release your needle from whichever one of these tools you're using, and then grab the magnet off of it. Put it back in its pouch so you don't lose it. Move all your tools aside. You do that one more rotation. If you put your needle in wrong, as you get about right here, you're going to feel a hard stop. That's because your needle is in slightly wrong and the hook cannot pass through that microscopic little section of the opening of your scarf. Now we've come to the part that I think confuses people. We're going to open this up, and that's pretty tightly closed. We're going to open this up and we're going to look for any debris. If I saw any debris in there, I would use my brush to quietly pull it out. So now that we're sure that there's no debris in there, the book tells you to oil these two brass rings. I don't use the oil cans, so I use a brush and I just gently brush oil around that. And this is the time when I don't dab the oil off. I want a nice wet brush. I'm going to go ahead and rotate my flywheel several times to distribute the oil as much as possible. Now you'll notice it doesn't come all the way up. I like to go ahead, just in case, and go ahead and paint the remainder of the oil on my brush on the top of this. And the reason being is it's just going to weep its way down, and it'll help keep the bar oiled for the long term. This bar doesn't move, so there's nothing else to do. You just want that oil on that brass ring so it can seep into this mechanism. And that's really all you want to do. Now, the other thing that I like to look at that the book does not mention is to make sure that the lubricant that came on the machine is still there. So the most important parts are here in the back of the machine. There's a spring up here at the top. You want to make sure that that has a sheen that shows that there's still lubricant on there. If there's not, you can get machine lubricant from a lot of the quilting stores will sell lubricant. If not, you can go online and buy it. And then in the back, there's a spring that's part of the mechanism that rises and lowers this bar. That spring is about 1 inch long. You want to make sure that the lubricant is still on that spring as well. So now we're done here, and we're going to close this up and then just come here and give it a firm slap. This one. Now we're at the point where we're ready to rethread. But before you begin rethreading, make sure that your uptake lever is all the way at the top and that your needle has been raised. So drop the thread onto your spindle, bring the thread up and rest it on the bar and just pull it forward so that it rests in the pigtail. I know you cannot see this on the video, but that's not nearly as important as the rest of this path, so I wasn't worried about you not seeing that. We're going to take the end of our thread and come here to the tension rod, and we're going to come from the back to the front, pulling the thread with us to the right. We're going to come from the back to the front in that second hole. The thread should wrap nicely around the tension rod, just as you see in the image labeled 3 on your machine. The image labeled 4 happens to be your pretensioner. So from the back, you're going to come through that hole at the top of the pretensioner. It's kind of at like 2 o'clock. Take the thread in both hands and firmly pull the thread into the pretensioner and tighten it up. Don't wrap around the pretensioner. You just want to go through the pretensioner discs. You don't want to come and wrap it around. You just want it coming on the left side of your pretensioner disc. Then from the front to the back, go through that hole in the bottom. Now, for the tensioning discs themselves, again, grab the thread with both hands, find the discs and slide it through. You want to pull that tight, pull it up and under the spring, the U part of the spring, bring it back over. It's going to grab that spring. If you grab a hold of the thread and pull, you'll see that spring move. That's what you want. So now you're going to take the thread under this hook labeled 6. We're going to pull it forward. We're going to pull it up rather, and we're going to go from right to left through the take-up bar. There's an eyelet in the take-up bar, and we're just going to pull right to left. So now we're coming from the pigtail to the tension bar, to the pretensioner, to the tensioner labeled 5, to this hook labeled 6, up to the take-up bar labeled 7. Now we're coming down to 8. And this is the interesting part because you really don't see what's going on in here. You want to take that thread and hold it like this and go through that silver thing, come around to the front. If you look closely, you'll see that there's kind of a tail there. What you're doing in taking it like this and wrapping it around is you're getting it in front of that little tail. Now we're ready to go into the hole on the side of the band that has your needle placement thumb screw, and you want to come left to right through that hole. Now you're going to thread your needle left to right, as long as the hook is up top, so that you've got 2 lips here. You've got the upper lip and the lower lip, and you just rest the thread in there. Slide it down your needle until it finds the hole. Grab the thread, pull the remainder of the thread out of your way, up front of the needle, and just pull. You want a clean path. You don't want the thread wrapping around your needle. Put the bobbin back in. We do raise the extension table if we have it on. We want to orient the thread with the little opening at the top. This lever we want to pull so we can get a hold of it, keeping in mind that holds the thread in place. So once you have it positioned on the post that the thread is holding on, then you want to give it a good push and hear that click. When you hear that click, you know you're in. Now we want to go ahead and make sure that we can pull the thread up. So manually, I always do it manually when I first change the bobbin or anything like that. So just let that thread pull up. Pull the thread to the back. I always want to check my stitching, so I have a scrap of thread that scrap of material that I've been sewing on. So we plug everything in and turn it back on. So I'm using the foot pedal. So I just come down here. Raise my presser foot. Snap my thread. Perfect. Now I know that was a lot to take in, but honestly, when I'm cleaning my machines, it takes me from start to finish 10 to 15 minutes. It doesn't take any time at all. What takes time is stopping, explaining, trying to get the picture right. That takes a lot of time, and it's well worth it to take care of your machine, especially a machine that's as powerful and as versatile as the little Rebel is. So I hope that helps you on your journey, and I'd really like to see you here again on Quilting on a Thread. Bye-bye now.